You know that feeling, or maybe the lack of feeling, when you're standing in front of something just breathtaking. A huge painting, maybe, or this incredible view. And you're just waiting for the awe or the sadness or something, but nothing comes.
Yeah, just flat.
Exactly. Not bored, not tired even, just this weird, like, eerie flatness.
It's a really common experience, actually, and it can be scary. We jump straight to, oh no, I'm depressed, or I'm completely burned out. Maybe even something's broken in me.
Right.
But what if that flatness, that nothing, isn't a failure? What if it's actually one of the most, well, intelligent and complex things your mind can do, structurally speaking?
Okay, that's counterintuitive. That flat line, that zero response, that's what we're diving into today. This idea of a silent coup d'etat of perception. It feels totally passive, like giving up, but you're saying it's active, a deliberate structural choice.
That's the argument, yes. When you feel nothing, it's often not because the thing you're looking at is empty. It's because your inner world, your perceptual field, has had to, well, forcibly rearrange itself.
Right.
Just to keep things running.
Rearranged itself. Okay, so how do we understand that?
We need to shift our focus. Stop looking so much at the content, like what specific feeling is missing, and look at the structure, how your whole system organizes feeling itself.
Okay.
We're going to use the lens of perception, specifically from Gestalt psychology, thinking about fields and structure and dynamics.
Right.
And the big immediate puzzle is this. Feelings, you know, they're supposed to grab your attention. They're meant to be sharp, demanding. They should step forward as the
main event.
Exactly. But in this state of flatness, they're somehow quietly demoted, pushed aside, exiled even.
Okay, but exiled where? They don't just poof, vanish, right?
Right, they don't just evaporate. They get pushed into the background, what Gestalt calls the ground.
The ground.
And this is where we usually misunderstand flatness. We think the ground is just, you know, empty space, wallpaper. But when feelings keep getting exiled there,
they build up.
They sink in, saturate the ground. It becomes heavy, dense, incredibly packed.
Packed with what, though? What's filling it up?
All the leftovers, the residue of unresolved stuff. Think about every argument you swallowed, every time you needed comfort but didn't ask, every bit of grief you told yourself you'd deal with later, or even joy you felt you couldn't really show because, I don't know, now's not the time.
Wow, okay.
All that energy, all those incomplete experiences, they have to go somewhere, they end up in the ground. And when it gets that full, it stops feeling like a complex archive of emotions. It just feels like noise, overwhelming static, that wallpaper for the soul. And that intense saturation, that's the hidden structure, the anatomy, really, of that profound emotional silence.
Okay, let's dig into this Gestalt framework more, because it sounds like it's the key to understanding this whole perceptual coup. We're talking about the structure of awareness itself, right? Not like a clinical diagnosis.
Exactly. It's about the physics of how we manage experience, especially under pressure, and how we survive emotionally.
Got it.
So the core idea is the field of awareness. Reality isn't just out there. It's what emerges, what takes shape in your awareness from moment to moment.
Okay.
And this field is always constantly organizing itself into two parts, figure and ground. It's a fluid process, always shifting, always aiming for, well, completion, survival.
So the figure, that's the thing that pops out, the urgent thing, like I'm hungry or I'm angry about this email, it demands attention.
Precisely. It's the spotlight. It calls for action, for resolution.
And then the ground. That's everything else, the context.
That's the context, the environment, the background hum, yes.
Yeah.
But crucially, it's also the storage unit. It holds the accumulated history, all the leftover bits of unfinished emotional business.
Unfinished business. Like those swallowed words and postponed tears you mentioned.
Exactly. Those are unfinished gestalts. Little loops of experience that never got closed.
Okay, so here's the twist you mentioned earlier. This profound flatness, this burnout feeling. It's not because we're empty of feelings.
No, quite the opposite, often. The common idea is I'm depleted, I have nothing left. But structurally, it's often caused by too much unprocessed emotional energy.
Too much noise in the background.
Too many of those small, unfinished gestalts piling up in the ground. It's critical to grasp this because we feel so much guilt about burnout, right? Like we failed.
Yeah, definitely.
But from this perspective, the collapse isn't a failure of coping. It's a consequence of the sheer volume of unfinished business the system is trying to manage.
Okay, walk me through that. How does that pile up actually cause the flatness? How does saturation happen?
Okay, think about what an unfinished gestalt really is. It's any time you had a genuine emotional response, anger, sadness, joy, fear, but something blocked its natural completion.
Blocked how?
It wasn't fully felt or expressed appropriately or integrated somehow.
Yeah.
The argument you swallowed, that took physical energy to hold back the words, right? The compliment you brushed off because you felt awkward or unworthy, that blocked a moment of connection, of maybe vulnerability.
Okay.
The terror you pushed down during that crazy work week because you had to be strong, you used energy to suppress it.
And that energy, that blocked feeling, it doesn't just vanish.
No, it settles right into the ground. Now, one or two of these, the system handles it, the ground absorbs them, maybe they get processed later, no big deal. But when it's habitual, when you're constantly postponing grief, censoring joy, swallowing anger day after day, the ground starts to get critically saturated, clogged, like a drain full of, well, ghosts of unmet needs, all clamoring for attention at once.
Right, so it's crowded back there.
Very crowded. So now imagine a new feeling tries to emerge. A new figure wants the spotlight. Let's say it's just mild sadness about something small.
Okay, what happens?
The system kind of freezes. It does a rapid risk assessment. It thinks, okay, if I let this one little bit of sadness come forward, does that mean I risk opening the floodgates?
Floodgates to all the other stuff.
To the whole backlog, all the unprocessed grief, the stored up anger, the deferred joy, everything waiting in the ground. Suddenly, the potential energy cost of dealing with that one small feeling looks astronomical. It feels prohibitive.
Because it might bring everything else with it.
Exactly. The potential for overwhelm is too high. So the mind does what seems in that moment like the only logical protective thing.
It is.
It slams the brakes on the whole figure formation process. It just stops letting any feeling properly emerge into the spotlight.
Wow. So it's not passive running out of steam. It's an active emergency shutdown.
A brilliant, if brutal, defensive strategy. The numbness you feel isn't depletion. It's censorship. The field is basically saying, look, we cannot afford the energy cost of emotional completion right now. Stability is priority number one. Even if stability means feeling nothing.
It trades feeling alive for feeling stable. Even if stable feels like deadness.
It trades potential chaos for a kind of rigid, controlled quiet. Hashtag B. Metaphors of suppression.
That's a really different way of looking at it. To help us really get a feel for this architecture of silence, let's talk about some metaphors. You mentioned one earlier, the unheard radio.
Right. This helps us see the split between internal reality and external function. You see someone, maybe yourself, going through the motions. They're efficient, they seem calm, they're getting things done.
Yeah, looks fine on the outside.
They might even notice things like, wow, my shoulders are really tense today, but they'll just label it focus. Or they feel a kind of hollowness in their chest and call it calm. They're functional, but there's a hidden cost.
And internally, what's the radio doing?
Internally, that emotional radio dial is spinning like crazy. Signals are coming in strong. A wave of affection for a pet, a sharp spike of irritation at an email, a quiet pang of regret about something from years ago. The signals are there, they're valid, they're real. But the receiver, the part of your awareness that tunes in, refuses to lock onto any station. It blocks the contact.
Why? Why block it if the signal's there?
Because every single station on that dial is crackling with the static of unfinished business. Remember the saturated ground.
Right, the backlog.
Every incoming feeling is potentially tangled up with all that old stuff. Every feeling carries the echo of, deal with me. Deal with all of this and now W. And the system's immediate panicked response is just, later, not now, no time, too much.
So the silence isn't peace. It's the effort of blocking the noise, the energy it takes to not listen to the radio.
Exactly. It's the force required to maintain the blockade against that constant internal pressure. That's the emergency protocol. Keep the signals out.
Okay. What about the dark stage?
This one focuses more on the dynamics of attention. Imagine your emotional field is like a theater stage. Normally, in a healthy state, feelings are like actors. They step into the spotlight, the figures say their lines, get acknowledged, and they gracefully exit into the wings of the ground.
And a nice rotation.
Yeah, fluid. But under chronic stress, when you're always pushing through, always keeping it together, the actors don't exit properly. They just kind of linger backstage. They start piling up back there, whispering, getting restless, maybe tugging on the curtain, demanding to be heard. The director that's your awareness starts to feel overwhelmed. How can you manage 50 actors all trying to grab the spotlight at once?
You can't, it's chaos.
So the director makes a radical structural call. Right, that's it. Shut the curtain, lock the stage doors, no one goes on tonight.
The whole production shuts down.
The stage goes completely dark. And the critical insight here is the stage isn't dark because the actors left or vanished. It's dark because the theater manager declared martial law.
Wow.
It's a strategic decision to impose order, even if that order feels like emptiness, because the alternative felt like unmanageable chaos.
That really lands differently. Okay, and the philosophical twist. You mentioned Nietzsche gazing into the abyss.
Yes. Usually we read that phrase, gaze into the abyss gazes also into you, as a kind of moral warning about becoming monstrous or losing yourself in darkness.
Right.
But let's try reading it through this Gestalt lens. What if the abyss is that massive, dense accumulation of unprocessed emotional stuff? That saturated ground we've been talking about.
Okay, so gazing into it is like trying to finally face all that backlog, trying to make it the figure.
Exactly. It's the attempt to really see and integrate all that pain, need, grief, whatever's packed in there.
And if you gaze too long, but nothing happens, no completion, no release.
Then, the theory goes, the abyss stops being something outside of you that you're looking at. It flips, becomes the lens through which you start seeing everything else.
Whoa.
The ground, that dense, heavy, unresolved history becomes so dominant, so thick, that it stops being just context. It becomes the filter for all new experiences. You're literally seeing the world through the residue of 1,000 unfinished emotional cycles.
So
The flatness isn't empty. It's full.
Yeah.
Full of this solidified, unprocessed past that's now coloring everything.
It can be, yes. The dynamic, vibrant texture of moment-to-moment feeling gets replaced by something that feels uniform, maybe cold, maybe just gray. You mistake the lack of emotional chaos for peace, but really, you've just be confused with the protective architecture itself. And building on that idea of fusion, we have to remember perception isn't passive. We're not just recording reality like a camera. We're actively sculpting it, prioritizing, deciding what gets the spotlight, what gets pushed back.
Okay.
Healthy perception is flexible, fluid, figures rise, get dealt with, dissolve back into the ground pretty smoothly. But this chronic suppression we're talking about, it creates field rigidity.
Rigidity, like the system gets jammed.
Exactly, it gets stuck.
Right.
The mechanism for letting feelings become figure gets intentionally jammed, not because it's broken or out of fuel, but because the system learned a rule. Starting this process costs too much. Don't initiate. Okay, but how does the mind maintain that rigidity? It must take effort, right? How does it keep the feeling suppressed? #A, field rigidity and adaptation.
Think about the interrupted structure. Again, the unfinished Gestalt. It's not just a one-off suppression. It's a loop of awareness and response that got deliberately cut short over and over. Let's use a physical analogy. Imagine a door left slightly ajar in a room you use every day.
Okay, like a closet door or something.
Right. At first, you really notice it. It catches your eye. It's a figure. Something incomplete, maybe slightly annoying, needs closing. You think, I'll get that later.
Happens all the time.
But later keeps not happening. Maybe you're busy, maybe you forget. After weeks, months of consciously or unconsciously deciding not to deal with the door, your perceptual system does something remarkable, something adaptive.
What?
It just stops seeing the door. It stops registering it as something needing attention. The door stops knocking on your awareness.
It just blends into the background.
It becomes part of the wall, part of the permanent architecture of the room. It's still physically there, ajar, but perceptually it's gone, vanished into the ground.
Wow. Okay, so apply that to emotions.
Apply that to the thousands of times you bit your tongue when you were angry. Every time you said, I'm fine, when you were actually heartbroken or terrified. Every time you put off dealing with a conflict or a need. Each one is an open door.
And eventually.
Eventually, the field becomes saturated, not just with the feeling itself, but with the structure of all those unclosed doors. It gets thick with the ghosts of those interrupted actions.
So the system isn't just full of feeling, it's full of blocked intentions.
Blocked processes, yes. And awareness, rather than collapsing under the sheer weight of all this unfinished business, does something else. It calcifies, it hardens, it learns and enforces a rigid, overarching rule.
The rule being?
Don't let anything rise. Don't start any emotional song you can't guarantee you have the energy to finish. The silence isn't passive. It's an active, adaptive, structural strategy. It feels like control, maybe even strength, but it comes at the cost of genuine, fluid feeling.
But holding all those doors shut, maintaining that rigid wall, that must take a huge amount of energy itself, right? It doesn't sound restful at all.
It's absolutely exhausting. It's constant internal vigilance. The energy that should be going into experiencing, processing, and resolving feelings is instead diverted into maintenance, into holding the line, reinforcing the defenses, managing the crowd backstage.
Which is why someone can look totally functional, even high-achieving on the outside, but be completely structurally burned out on the inside, because all their energy is going into not feeling, into maintaining that silence.
Precisely. It's invisible labor.
Yeah.
#B, attentional avoidance in history. And this rigidity directly affects how attention works. We tend to think of attention as something we consciously direct, like a flashlight.
Yeah, I choose what to focus on.
Sometimes. But in the Gestalt view, attention is also an emergent property of the whole field. It naturally flows towards whatever the field organizes as most urgent, most incomplete, most needing resolution right now.
Okay, so if the field, the ground, is crammed full of urgent, unresolved stuff, why doesn't attention just go there? Why the avoidance? Why the numbness instead of feeling overwhelmed by the backlog?
This is maybe the trickiest part. It's because of the cost of history. When a new feeling tries to emerge, a small, manageable one, it doesn't arrive alone.
What does it bring with it?
It arrives dragging the enormous weight, the entire history of every similar feeling from the past that was dismissed, denied, or left incomplete.
Okay, hang on. Give me an example. Let's say I feel, I don't know, a genuine flicker of warmth, of tenderness towards a colleague who was kind to me, a little figure of connection.
Okay, that flicker of tenderness starts to rise into awareness. But the system, the field, immediately does a background check. It scans its history, and it remembers. Last time I allowed tenderness, it led to vulnerability. Vulnerability felt dangerous, maybe it led to getting hurt or disappointed, and that hurt was never properly processed, never resolved. So this new small flicker of tenderness, it has to pass through this kind of emotional baggage claim.
Oh, wow.
And that baggage claim contains the echoes, the ghosts of every single time a similar need for connection or vulnerability was ignored, punished, or simply unfinished.
So the system isn't just seeing the small, new feeling, it's seeing the mountain of historical baggage attached to it.
Exactly. It sees the potential cost of completion, which now includes processing not just this moment, but potentially reopening all those old wounds associated with it.
And the calculation is?
The calculation comes back, too dangerous, too costly, way too messy, abort mission.
Yeah.
And so attention actively avoids the figure. It pushes it back down before it can fully form. This is a key mechanism behind that feeling of dissociation or numbness.
Okay, that explains the avoidance, and you said this leads to a paradox. We feel like we're falling apart, fragmented.
Right, it feels like dissociation, like things are breaking down.
Right.
But structurally, from this perspective, it's actually the opposite. It's over-integration.
Over-integration? How?
The system is working incredibly hard, folding in on itself, using immense energy to enforce rigid boundaries internally. It's desperately trying to prevent fragmentation by clamping down, by focusing all its available resources on one single goal, feeling less.
So the feeling of breaking apart is actually the strain of holding everything together so tightly.
It's the strain of maintaining an unsustainable, overly rigid, hyper-integrated structure. It's the system's most loyal, dedicated act of self-preservation, even if it feels absolutely terrible. #, see isomorphism and physical eruption.
Okay, let's bring the body into this picture more explicitly. You mentioned isomorphism earlier, the idea that the structure in the emotional field mirrors the structure in the body.
Yes, isom meaning same, morphism meaning form. The form in the mind reflects in the form of the body and vice versa. They are dynamically linked.
So if the internal emotional field is rigid, clamped down, censored, the body has to reflect that.
It has to. The body isn't just passively experiencing the stress or the numbness. It's actively participating in maintaining the suppression. That rigid, censored emotional field requires a physically suppressed body to hold it in place.
So the body isn't betraying us with its tension or symptoms?
No, it's demonstrating incredible structural loyalty. It's doing exactly what the overall system has demanded of it to maintain that no feelings allowed rule.
How does that actually show up? Beyond just feeling tense, are there specific physical patterns linked to this kind of emotional censorship?
Absolutely. Look for the subtle, chronic patterns. Things like a persistent flattening of the voice, losing that natural musicality or inflection that signals emotional range.
On the tone.
Or really shallow breathing stuck high up in the chest. Deep diaphragmatic breathing allows for and even facilitates deeper emotions. Shallow breathing helps keep them contained. Chronic, low-level tension in the jaw, the neck, the shoulders hiked up towards the ears, almost permanently like a physical shield. Or tension deep in the pelvis, locking down movement and maybe sexual or creative energy. These aren't just random tensions. They become part of the physical architecture needed to enforce the keep feelings down policy.
So the muscles are literally holding those unfinished gestalts, those open doors, shut.
In a very real way, yes.
Yeah.
But here's the crucial part. The suppression might work on a conscious level. You don't feel the rage or the grief, but the energy doesn't just vanish.
Okay.
Neuroscience backs this up. Suppressing the conscious experience of an emotion often amplifies the signal in the body's autonomic nervous system. You block the feeling from awareness, but your limbic system is still firing. Cortisol might be surging. Muscles are definitely tensing in response to the blocked impulse. The body still hears the scream behind the wall.
So if awareness, the director, won't let the feelings take the stage consciously?
They find another way out. They force their way to the surface, but they emerge disguised as symptom.
Symptom, like
Right.
physical illness.
Could be. Or behavioral things. That highly charged, saturated ground, unable to discharge its energy through healthy emotional expression and completion, erupts. Think about sudden, baffling insomnia, or that disproportionate rage that explodes over something tiny, like spilling coffee,
Yeah.
or bursting into tears during a completely random, bland TV commercial. These aren't random malfunctions. They are the unconscious figures breaking through. The field is always seeking balance, always trying to complete itself. If you barricade the front door, the energy will find a way out, even if it has to blow out a window.
So the silence, the flatness, it's actually incredibly full of tension, history, thwarted energy, and this intelligent, if desperate, attempt at control.
Exactly. It's anything but empty.
Okay, so we need to shift how we even think about this state, not as just a breakdown or an emptiness, but as the final, most complex structure the system could create. Like, the silence itself is the main figure now, the meta-gestalt.
That's a great way to put it. It's the highest order rule the system is currently enforcing. Silence is survival. Hashtag #TechChagNA. The silence as devotion and protest. And if we see it that way, we have to radically reframe what this toxic silence means. It feels toxic, it is detrimental long-term, but its origin. It wasn't born from failure. In a way, it was born from devotion.
Devotion, how?
Think of it as the field's last-ditch, desperate act of protective love for the self. The underlying message is something like, this is too much, you're going to shatter. So I, the field, will take the entire burden. I will lock the stage. I will exile every feeling. I will pay the immense energy cost of this rigidity, also that you, the core self, don't break.
Wow, so the strategy worked in a terrible way. The person survived. They didn't shatter.
Often, yes, they
Yeah.
survive.
Right.
The survivor then looks at the thick walls, the locked doors, the silence, and mistakes the loyal protector for a prison.
Because it feels like a prison now.
Of course it does. And that confusion often comes down to this isomorphism of safety. Remember, in deep burnout, the system's #1 priority shifted. It wasn't about thriving or feeling good or connecting anymore. The absolute overriding need became do not collapse. Survival at all costs.
Okay.
And to meet that need, the entire field had to reorganize itself. It made safety synonymous with control. Total control over expression, over reaction, over vulnerability, over need itself. Anything unpredictable felt like a lethal threat.
So it chose the deadness of total control over the terrifying unpredictability of feeling alive.
It made a calculated, albeit costly, trade-off based on its history and perceived threat level. But that silence, while born of devotion, is also something else. It's also a powerful protest.
A protest against what?
Against being ignored for so long. The silence is perhaps the loudest possible message the field can send back to awareness. It's effectively shouting, okay, you ignored every whisper, you ignored every plea, every nudge, every feeling that tried to get your attention. You treated every emotion like an inconvenience or a threat. Fine, now I give you nothing.
Wow.
And maybe, just maybe, in this profound, deafening nothing, you will finally be forced to recognize the sheer volume, the catastrophic weight of everything you pushed away.
It's the structure itself crying out, look what you made me become to keep you functioning.
Exactly. And simply recognizing the silence as that kind of message, rather than just a malfunction or a deficiency, that's often the very first step towards a real perceptual shift. It was the beginning of dialogue instead of diagnosis. And understanding this, that it's a structure, a strategy, a protest, helps explain why the usual advice for burnout often falls flat. Things like, oh, just get more rest, or take a vacation, or even set better boundaries.
Right. Those things sound good, but for someone deep in this state, they often don't touch it. Why not?
Because those suggestions assume the emotional field is still basically porous, receptive, like a dry sponge ready to soak up rest or refreshment.
But you're saying it's not a sponge anymore.
In deep rigidity, the field is more like hardened clay or stone. Rest just bounces off. Relaxation feels impossible, maybe even agitating. The core rule, no figures allowed, is still rigidly in place. Trying to force relaxation or enjoyment can actually become another unfinished task, another source of guilt. I'm not even resting right.
Creating yet another layer of failure.
Precisely. The underlying mechanism, the censorship, is still jammed. So real change, real healing in this context usually requires more than just adding resources like rest. It requires structural disruption, a reorganization of the perception itself.
Okay, how? What's the pivot point?
The pivot is moving attention from the symptom, the feeling of nothing, to the system, the mechanism creating the nothing. It's shifting from the passive statement, I feel nothing, to the active, curious recognition, I am somehow actively preventing feeling.
That's a huge shift, taking ownership of the mechanism.
It is. The focus moves away from the experience of emptiness and turns towards the incredibly complex, energy-guzzling machine that built and maintains the silence. The new strategy becomes, make the silence itself the figure. Turn attention towards the wall, towards the locked door, and ask with genuine curiosity, what vital, loyal rule is my system enforcing right now by maintaining this stillness? What is it protecting me from?
Okay, and you have an analogy for this too, the vault analogy.
Yes, the numbness isn't an empty void, it's more like a vault. A high-security, climate-controlled vault.
And inside?
Inside are all the preserved pieces of the self that had to be locked away for survival. Every suppressed feeling, yes, but also maybe suppressed truths, unlived potentials, deferred dreams, swallowed insights. They're not dead in there, they're perfectly preserved, waiting.
Waiting for what? Rescue?
Not necessarily dramatic rescue, more like recognition, acknowledgement that they exist, that they were locked away for a reason, and that maintaining the vault takes enormous constant energy. The problem isn't usually the feelings inside the vault, it's the energy drain required to keep the vault locked. Hashtag take she. The turn to witnessing.
Okay, so if all this stuff is locked in the vault and trying to blast it open might just make the system clamp down harder, how do you start? How does completion happen without triggering panic and reinforcing the rigidity? Does it have to be some huge dramatic catharsis?
Usually not. Actually, aiming for big catharsis can sometimes backfire, reinforcing the system's fear of overwhelm. Gestalt completion, remember, doesn't necessarily require high drama. Its core ingredient is simply contact.
Contact.
Real, gentle, non-judgmental contact with what is.
Let's revisit the frozen lake metaphor. Imagine you've been living on the surface of a frozen lake for a long, long time. Maybe years.
Okay.
You've forgotten it was ever liquid. It feels solid, dependable, maybe sterile, but safe. That ice, that was the protective structure, the rigidity, the vault, the preservation mechanism.
Exactly. Now, you don't need to take a pickaxe and violently shatter the whole surface. That would be terrifying, destabilizing. Instead, you just need to find a place, maybe a small crack, and gently kneel down. Place your bare hand on the ice.
All right.
And just feel. Make contact. Notice the coldness, the solidity. But also, maybe feel for the faintest vibration beneath. The subtle pulse of the water, the life, still moving underneath the ice. The life was preserved, not extinguished.
So contact isn't about forcing change, it's about acknowledging what's already there, including the protective structure itself.
Yes, that's the key. Acknowledging that the door exists, even if you're not ready to open it, is the first step towards closing that old interrupted gestalt. Recognizing the silence, the ice, the vault, not as a personal failing or a malfunction, but as a profoundly loyal, intelligent, temporary survival strategy.
The silence became toxic not because the feelings were inherently bad,
but because the silence itself, the protective strategy, was never met with understanding. It was treated like the enemy, like something to be fought or fixed, which just made it dig in its heels.
So the same awareness that unconsciously built the structure is the awareness that can now consciously, gently begin to relate to it differently.
Precisely. The field isn't failing or broken, it's evolving. It's signaling it might be ready to start integrating the immense wisdom, history, and energy it held captive in that vault under that ice.
So a burnout, seen this way, it's not the end of the road.
It can be an initiation, a threshold, a sign that the old rules of survival, based on rigid control, are no longer serving you, and a deeper, more integrated way of feeling might be possible on the other side.
Wow. Okay, so recapping here. This deep emotional burnout, this flatness, it's fundamentally an intelligent protective strategy. It's a perceptual distortion born out of a need for safety, not a character flaw or just running out of gas. The silence we feel isn't empty. is packed full of history and protective mechanisms. And the path forward isn't necessarily about fixing the numbness or forcing feeling, but about gently turning towards and witnessing the structure that created the silence in the first place, honoring its protective intent.
Exactly. The field, the system, held all of that silent tension for you. It showed immense loyalty in its own way. And as you start to recognize that, to soften around that protective structure instead of fighting it, the silence itself begins to shift. It gets ready to hand back the key to the vault.
And inside that silence, you said there's a question waiting.
It's holding, I think, a final, single, potentially devastatingly liberating question. It cuts deeper than the practical questions like, how do I manage my time better? Or even the therapeutic ones like, how do I feel my feelings?
Okay, I'm ready. What is the question the silence has been guarding all this time?
The silence is asking you gently, persistently, to sit with this. Who am I when I'm not managing my feelings?
Oh, wow. Who am I when I'm not? Constantly policing the stage. When I'm not spending all my energy holding the door shut. When my identity isn't built around control and suppression and performance.
What remains? Who emerges when the energy dedicated to managing experience is finally liberated for experience?
That lands deep. It really forces you to look beyond the coping mechanisms that have maybe become your entire sense of self.
It invites you to confront the possibility of a self that exists beyond the architecture of defense. It's a terrifying question, perhaps, because it points towards freedom from control. But sitting with it, letting it ripple through you, that's often what begins to gently stir the ghosts in the ground, the thaw of the ice. The next step isn't solving, it's just seeing. Seeing the structure, hearing the question.